Prospect tells the story of a girl named C as she travels through space with her father on their way to a remote alien planet. The daughter of a prospector, C helps her father Damon as they get ready to embark on their next dig. But she worries that they could end up stranded if they don't make it back in time, since the space station is making its final orbit around the planet. Damon reassures her that they have plenty of time, but C doesn't have much faith in her father, since the gems that they're going to the planet for clearly aren't the only thing on his mind. After taking some drugs to help him sleep, C tries to talk him into going back to their home planet, but he passes out as she's talking to him. The next morning he wakes up and immediately takes some gummy drugs and then prepares to land on the planet. But almost immediately after they depart from the space station, something goes wrong with the ship and they end up crash landing, where he takes some more gummy drugs to calm down and then gives C a map and tells her to find out where they are. So after she finds their location, he tells her to suit up so they can head out into the planet, where we see the air is filled with some kind of toxic dust. Damon tells her which radio channel to switch to so they can communicate before they head out. Not long into their expedition, they come across an amateur Orlac mine, and Damon decides to check to see if the last crew left anything behind. And sure enough, they did. So he begins the complicated and slightly disgusting process of harvesting the Orlac, where he warns C not to spill any of the fluid in the pit, since it could cause the entire pit to blow up. When he shows her the gem and tells her how much it's worth, she suggests that they just take it and get back to the ship so they don't get stranded. But Damon says that where they're going, there's enough Orlac to make them rich. So he tells C to go refill their water bottles. But on her way back, Damon calls over the radio that two men are approaching their site. As she watches from a distance, one of the men introduces himself as Ezra before the other guy, who apparently doesn't speak, starts ransacking their site. Damon tells them he doesn't have anything and tries to reason with them, but Ezra pins him down and demands to know where his ship is. But instead, Damon decides to tell him that he knows the location of a massive deposit of Orlac called the Queen's Lair and says that he'll take them to it if they agree to split it with him. So Ezra agrees to the deal, and as they lead Damon away, C follows behind them with the gun, and when she sees an opportunity, she hops out and surprises them. Damon tells the big guy to drop his gun, and as C holds him at gunpoint, Damon goes rummaging through Ezra's pack and is about to steal their stash of Orlac when all of a sudden the big guy goes for his gun. C fires, but it doesn't stop him, and he and Damon end up killing each other. But as she tries to reload her gun, Ezra gets the drop on her. So she makes a run for it and eventually finds her way back to the ship, where she tries to get it to take off, but it's too heavily damaged. And it's not long before Ezra finds his way to the ship, where C shoots him as he climbs inside. So holding him at gunpoint, she gives him a medical kit to patch himself up, as she demands that he take her to his ship. But he tells her that his ship is wrecked too, so he proposes that instead of killing him, she take him to the Queen's Lair, and in return he'll offer her protection from the mercenaries that are guarding it, and then split the Orlac with her, 50-50. So she agrees, and holding him at gunpoint, they set out to find the Queen's Lair. On the way, Ezra tries to make conversation and asks C what her name is, but she refuses to tell him. After wandering through the bush for a while, bothered by his wound, Ezra stops to take a break, where C spots a person watching them off in the distance. But when he runs away, Ezra tells her that they should follow him to see if his people would be willing to trade for medical supplies to treat his wound. So after following him to the rest of the tribe, Ezra asks them if they'd be willing to trade for medical supplies. But instead, they explain that their only female has recently died, so they offer him everything that he asked for, as well as a giant case full of Orlac, if Ezra gives C to them. But as Ezra considers their offer, C makes a run for it, where one of them chases after her, but she manages to escape by cutting his air supply and disappearing into the brush. After wandering through the forest until she almost runs out of air, she hears a voice on the radio. So she follows it back to a tent in the forest, where she's reunited with Ezra. So she asks him if he was going to give her to them, but Ezra tells her that he wasn't. He says that after she left, they weren't too keen on giving him any medical supplies, so now he needs her to help him amputate his arm. So after numbing up his arm, she gets to work amputating it as he talks her through the process. After the surgery is complete, they continue on their journey to the Queen's Lair. On the way, Ezra asks her about the book she's always carrying around with her, and they bond over conversation about it, so C finally tells him her name. As night falls, they make it to the Queen's Lair, where they find the mercenaries that are guarding it, doing a bit of target practice while they wait for C and her father to come harvest the Orlac for them. So Ezra tells C that he'll pretend to be her father and to just let him do all the talking. So they proceed to go down and try to negotiate with the mercs. where Ezra tells them that they'd be willing to give up a portion of their share of the Orlak in return for a ride off the planet in the Merc ship. So after a tense negotiation, the Mercs agree to the new deal and lead them to the Queen's lair. As the mercenary leads them over to the pit, he explains that one of his men tried to dig up the Orlak himself, but the pit ended up eating his arm, so they decided to call in Damon and C to harvest the Orlak for them instead. So Ezra hops down and starts digging out the sacks that contain the Orlak. But when he tries to cut through the meaty membrane, he messes up and causes it to dissolve into a sizzling pool of liquid, destroying the Orlak inside. He tells the mercenary not to worry and that he's just not used to doing it with one arm, and says that they'll try again. But the same thing happens with the next one. So when the mercenary starts to get impatient, C decides to jump down and try harvesting one instead, but the same thing happens to hers. So the mercenary decides that they can't do the job and tells them that the deal's off. But as he turns to walk away, Ezra uses the harvesting tool to cut the back of his leg, causing him to fall into the pit, where Ezra shoves the Merc's head into one of the Orlak holes, killing him. After hearing the commotion, the other mercenaries come running over to see what's going on, where Ezra tells them that he just fell into the pit, trying to get a closer look. But when they notice the cut on his leg, they get ready to shoot Ezra, but C grabs the harvesting fluid and throws it into the pit, causing the whole thing to explode. As the smoke clears, Ezra grabs the dead Merc's gun as they make a run for it into the forest, where he stops and shoots one of the Mercs that's chasing them, before running deeper into the woods to hide when he runs out of bullets. As they see one of the Mercs approaching, Ezra tells C to run to cause a distraction while he tries to sneak up on the Merc with a knife. But the distraction doesn't work, so as the Merc shoots at the tree that Ezra is hiding behind, C runs over and tackles her. But when Ezra comes out from behind the tree, the Merc ends up stabbing him. So he uses the last of his strength to stab her in the neck. Ezra tells C to leave him behind and take the Merc's ship to get off the planet. But instead, she runs back to the Merc's camp and grabs a medical kit and then rushes back to help Ezra. After tending to his wound, she helps him back to the ship, where they manage to get off the planet and get back to the space station just in time before it leaves.